everybody, and welcome to this second lecture series of Finnish Handicrafts. Friends, my name is Isoniemi, and I'm a textile artist and art pedagogy, and also board member of Finnish Handicrafts Friends. And in that role, I'm leading this lecture today. And warmly welcome to this lecture of the enjoyment of crafts. And today we have two guest speakers, Kouhia and Rosa Tolnov Clausen. And the program will go so that half an hour will each performer speak, and then after 7 we will have discussion and possibility to make some questions. And also I underline that for Kouhia's lesson or lecture, the questions can be asked in Finnish, also answered in Finnish. And in other case, with Rosa, we will translate the question so that everyone will get their answers. So I shortly will introduce Kouhia so that she will be able to start her lecture. Kouhia is a handicraft researcher and a professional in cultural field, and also a university lecturer in craft studies, and she specialized in yarn techniques and knitted textiles. And she has done a PhD degree in Helsinki University on the theme of unraveling the meanings of textile hobby crafts. She has also done Master of Arts in Textiles in University of Lapland, and also 2008 Master of Education in Handicrafts in Helsinki University. Furthermore, she has studied basic studies in museology, and she has teacher ability in history, and also studied in EdTech Design Institute. Kouhia has worked as an expert, lecturer and professor in Finland and abroad. She has published many research articles from the fields of handicrafts, knowledge building, and from the area of the changing cultural heritage in both national and international publications. And I think I will ask Anna to come here and start her speech about collaborative and multisensory crafts as sources of well-being. Please welcome Anna.
Hi guys. So I was first asked to talk about this topic, collaborative and multisensory crafts as sources of well-being. And the topic eventually turned out to be enjoyment of crafts. So what I find in common between these two topics, first and foremost, crafts, and the second, the managemental sense of the self, regarding the idea of being balanced, I'm enjoying making and being well in general. I will talk about both of these notions, but first start from the most obvious, so what's more familiar to me in a sense, so craft. So in a historical sense, the term craft was predominantly used in a reference to strength and power attributed to the people legitimized by the mastery of their skills. This term has also compelling historical alignments with the idea of increasing expertise resulting from the knowledge of practice. In the 16th century, the term craft was used as a reference to intellectual skill. Later definitions glide over the spectrum of modernist interpretations of craft as the mastery of the handmade beauty, as well as the creativity and freedom of expression related to art. As a term, craft has been understood in general as an interaction between the human and material through the application of first one's skill and then material-based knowledge. What is noteworthy is that crafts are often applied to a relatively small-scale production. This basically means that the work of the hand is conducted with small-scale tools and equipment, either manual or digital, it doesn't matter. And most often at homes of the working people as domestic crafts, or today at a rising scale at open pop-in type makerspaces. Recently, craft has been understood increasingly in relation to the context of the practice of the making, which realizes authenticity, originality, and homegrown nostalgia. I've been discussing with this term with some of the language revisers who have been working with my texts, and they've actually come in the sense that the term crafting is nowadays a bit more suitable to define the actual making than this combination of craft making, which is a bit artificial in the sense that it doesn't quite include the idea of the flow of crafting as well as this new or newer term. So this new term, crafting, has been repeatedly contextualized as a form of making that confuses elements from different visual, material, and conceptual frameworks. This term is actually closer to the Finnish word käsityö, which is defined as an entity including both the idea of the product that is going to be made during the process and the process itself. Finnish word käsityö tends to sustain a view of the holistic process as a core element both in professional crafts and hobby crafts. So in this way, crafting really emphasizes the role of the maker as an individually initiated, skillful act conducted by the practitioner herself or himself. So eventually to one of my favorites, so hobby crafts. So personally my research interest has been on hobby crafts, meaning crafts conducted by the people interested in crafts as part of their leisure. So these people who work with crafts and to whom crafts are neither a profession nor a primary source of income. I must say that, well, to be frank, it feels rather inconvenient for me to define this hobby crafts from such a capitalistic view, meaning that it is something else or something excluded from the source of income for the maker. It can be though, but usually it's not. But using that kind of definition on hobby crafts is, however, it's an outcome of the many changes that originate from the transformation of work and leisure that occurred during the Industrial Revolution. So actually quite a long and established tradition. This view of hobbies are often accompanied with the 18th century perception of the amateur work as you can see here, as an aesthetically accomplished occupation done for enjoyment with little consideration of use or functionality. This is outlined by the British craft scholar Stephen Nod in his book Amateur Craft. And here is the point that we come across the notion of enjoyment. So it doesn't lie in the crafts alone, but in the way and in the manner and in the mentality of taking up this activity called crafting. So this starts to unveil a bit of this frame of reference when we talk about craft and well-being. So I'm also interested in history, so a bit here and there also, a bit look at the brief history of leisure. So it was only in the 19th century when the notion of leisure began to be applied in the opportunities to gain intrinsic satisfaction from the activities outside the workplace. This was due to the changes of the society at the time, as I said, caused by industrial development, so the concentration of capital and the differentiation of work. In approaching the concept of leisure, I'm very fond of the writings of the Norwegian-American philosopher and sociologist Thorstein Veblen, particularly his book The Theory of Leisure Class, published in 1899, which is translated in 2002 as Joutilasluokka, where he located leisure as non-productive pastime of the conspicuous class, so joutilaiden ajan viete. Weber interpreted that this new conspicuous class could afford the life of idleness, and that because of this affordance they were capable of undertaking redundant activities just for the sake of beauty or expressiveness. Accordingly, Weber suggested that conspicuous leisure pursuits highlighted the status of this newly invented conspicuous class in comparison to the working class because of the accumulation of the social capital. So this means that the more these conspicuous people took up these redundant activities, the more educated they become and the wider the gap became between the conspicuous class and the working class. This was also reflected in the habits of consumption and the way of spending time, especially time regarding to leisure, actually having a sort of leisure in life. So this clarifies how the leisure gained a modern perspective and how leisure time activities became understood as a capability to accomplish subjective value through these kind of non-productive work activities, which were outside the disturbance of the economic forces and pressures of the productive labor. These kind of activities for Veblen were activities which had no function as everyday chores, like, for example, hunting for leisure and learning dead languages, practicing art, and producing all kinds of artistic and kind of non-productive or non-useful objects. So all things expressive he counted among these things. Interestingly though, at the time craft wasn't so counted among these idle class activities because it had a very profound power as a manual work. And of course, Veblen's perspective somehow excludes many freedom activities of women and working class. So this can be seen as also an attempt to conceptualize the thinking of the time. In fact, it was much later in the 20th century, like in the post-60s, when the recreational role of crafting was highlighted, and when the techniques identified previously as household maintenance lost their status, and where began to see they were primarily seen as postmodern choice as a part of the recreational leisure. But already you see here in the 20s, so this is from Kotiliesi magazine. So in the beginning of the 20th century, the idea of passion was already so well integrated in crafts, so that crafts could be harnessed in other kinds of purposes, like advancing social and cultural maintenance. Here, craft is presented as leisure time activity that adds up to this woman's sense of well-being, and with which she complies some educative measures and practices the basic skills needed in society. So it was wrapped in a package of the moral norms regarding good citizenship. So a bit later in the 30s, this is quite interesting actually, because in the war era, craft was, you could say, like literally in a forefront of the nation. In the late 30s, as these pictures are from this is the front page of Suomen Kuvalehti journal. Crafting was pictured several times in Suomen Kuvalehti, in the front page. And for example, in these pictures, crafting represents, or can be read to represent, feminine diligence, hard-working attitude, and profoundness. More interesting of these two is this right picture. If you recognize here, this Kyösti Kallio's wife, Kaisa Kallio, was at the time known as the mother of the country. So she was very, indeed, a craftsperson. She had a rural background, was the mother of 6, known as a humble, hard-working woman before she entered the presidential palace, and she this position as the mother of the country were also perhaps emphasized because of her predecessor Ellen Spin, who was considered more as a woman of formality and dignity, and when Kaisa entered there, she bore the loom from Nivala with her, and many carpets and textiles that still exist have been woven with those looms. So this image here is kind of well suitable to represent the idea of a nation and how crafts was included in this very image. So a bit further, Omin Käsin journal was very influential from the 30s to 70s in spreading knowledge of crafts. It was widely subscribed and therefore capable of providing information of the trends and influences of the scene throughout the country. Another interesting thing is that hobby crafts were talked about in the 60s as a heart's desire and as a choice of leisure. Here this let's say page or quote or whatever page, kind of scanned page from this book called Taitava tyttö ompelee ja pukeutuu hyvin. So it starts with a description of crafts as a favorite hobby of a woman, of course. So much happened between 60s and 2000, but because I don't have time to describe everything, so I jump to today. We all know that during the past decade or two, there has been this massive craft boom. We have called it, or researchers have called it here in Finland and elsewhere in the Western world as a resurrection of craft or craft boom or whatever. It has many names. But the idea is that crafts have gained much popularity, especially in the Western world. This idea is much talked, but however, it is not quite transferable, this hype from US and UK back to Finland, because in the light of statistics, crafts has always been part of the everyday life and leisure of the Finns. And actually the popularity of crafting has remained not unchanged, but virtually unchanged over the past 3 decades. And that's where the statistics really start. In the US and in the UK, the craft activities has been rising, especially among the young women, with the growing popularity of knitting and crocheting throughout the early 2000s. Whereas in Finland, crafting or the rise of crafting has focused mainly on multi-material crafts, so to say, so manufacturing furniture, woodwork, as well as building and repairing, and also those new techniques, newly emerged techniques. So also in this way we have come to embrace crafts in a more multi-material manner, and also making this multi-materiality of crafts quite visible. So in 2010s, these are pictures from one of my articles, which are, all these pictures have been published in Käsityön Ystävien Vinkkipankki Facebook page. I have permission to use all the photos, and these represent quite well what these hobby crafts are today. So this is kind of the manufacturing making. Then are these small crafts with kind of ethical ethos or economical utilization of materials, reuse, and then finding the techniques of the grandparental generation again. So in the 2010s, handicrafts are practiced with modern spices, emphasizing the well-being effects, enjoying fast crafts like these jämälankatossut here, so crafts that are quite easily made in general. There are other streams as well, but in general. And inspiration is gained from short courses in craft centers, hobbyist peer groups, online of course. So crafts enthusiasts has also rediscovered traditional techniques of grandparents' generations, as I said, that apply to new materials and products of modifying and blending. This article is published 2030 by NTV3. It says that cronyism is now in fashion, and this is also kind of the same phenomena as homing. For many craft enthusiasts, this economical utilization and the reuse of materials are the fundamental values of crafting, as can be seen from this very recent article released in the website of Strömsö. And this reused materials and upcycling materials, this is kind of the mega trend of the hobbyism at the moment. Also combining different materials, diverse materials, different techniques, and seeking inspiration from the fields of art. This is very popular at the moment, as this work of the textile artist Miriam Marsh shows. These are kind of a layered textile paintings, which just got painted first and then sewn as a layered composition in the forefront of the painting. Also, testing and developing unforeseen craft materials, or finding kind of forgotten materials, or materials that could be upcycled, as this fish skin, this is very trending at the moment, materials that could be otherwise described as junk. So materials as fish skin, they are very trending at the moment. This was very recent Recent article published in Iltalehti, so it appeared that almost every Finnish star actress had now the same purse made of fish skin, made of this brand Kouhia, this ecological luxury brand. So really kind of the creme of the movies, so to say, has now adopted also craft items, handcrafts for their wardrobe. At least it seems so. This is from Jussi Kaala this year. Also, online accessibility has laid foundations for a thriving craft culture that is constantly changing and living under different social, cultural and economic influences with the emergence, shift and weighing of different craft trends. I've been following this, it's a bit unclear, but these few hashtags on Instagram. And the interesting thing is that in 2017, about the same time of the year, it was in April, there were a bit less than 20,000 posts that had hashtag Käsityö, and now it's like 100,000 more. And the Käsityöt, it has like 4 times bigger number of posts. Neurology is a very hard disease for the craftspeople because it has like now 8 times, almost 8 times bigger the number of these posts. And also neurology, and then some reference from the English-speaking world, which is not quite referential in a way that it has got everything on it. So following this Finnish hashtag is quite interesting because it really tells you about the craft scene and the popularity of craft scene in Finland, because they are not used anywhere else than in Finnish-speaking world. But a bit about this digital materiality once more. It means like the emergence of material flows online. For example, this Instagram. Talking about trends and sharing, what seems to have emerged is first the act of participation, meaning that the threshold of taking part in different craft events today is perhaps lower than ever. This activeness is something profoundly different from the close friend-on-friend knitting and sewing circles of the 60s. This means that participation now tickles the minds of the hobbyists, and the more active, this active sense is talked about, the more it engenders publicity, and the more it also captures many people. Second, the sense of togetherness is also mediated by this digital materiality, as I said. Such was this Kalevala craft project initiated online by Milla Elo and Sari Åstrand with a bunch of other volunteers. What's interesting about this project is that it was completed on a voluntary basis and with good intentions. So in the first place it was intended as a collaborative craft project for the hobbyists in order to celebrate the 100-year-old Finland in 2017. And it was therefore restricted to use these instructions for this Kalevala project for the purposes of profit. And it says that the CAL is free of charge for all the participants, including the parents and peer support. And all the volunteers are doing this without compensation. So this compensation is not profitable in a sense that it would turn out money, but it's something else. It's this sense of sharing and a sense of togetherness gained from the making. There are other similar projects with interest of sharing.
It's already have.
Okay, so I just show some of the. So many of the projects are a bit of goofy, like these flash mobs. You can watch these from the YouTube, if you like. And then one also very goofy project that I popped to my computer like some days ago, what this heavy nail and Kisatso World Championships in heavy knitting. And also in this heavy knitting, the attitude is that craft making belongs to everyone. So crafts, some few words of the materials of making then. I would like to highlight that even though the enjoyment of crafts is often talked about the perspective of the single craftsperson, it is also very material practice. I could talk about this a bit more, but perhaps more about the messiness. So, because craft is not always like a pure enjoyment, there are also other strengths in craft making. So, what we could learn to appreciate, and perhaps what we could learn something new of crafting, is that we should learn to appreciate the messiness of crafting. So craft making may not always be flowing, may always not be fun or enjoyable, and it doesn't always nurture well-being. It's a messy project, and crafts may sometimes have bias or contradictory meanings, and these meanings may even have a demonstration of the craft as a conflict of the self. So how could we learn better appreciate the capability to enjoy crafting? So my opinion is that by sharing, collaborating, and learning new of ourselves, experimenting with the previously unknown materials and techniques, and actually practicing and making crafts in an unforeseen context. So being messy and restarting and recreating, understanding that craft well-being is not always this, it's not always like simplicity or pureness, but it's also craft well-being is like a form of collaboration. Thanks.
Many thanks for the interesting lecture, Anna. And now we move forward in the program. My pleasure is to introduce you Rosa Clausen. She's a textile designer and doctoral candidate in crafts, and is studying PhD. She's a PhD student in crafts in Gothenburg University in Sweden. And she has also studied casual weaving in Japan, Kawashima Textile School. She has a MA graduate in textile in design school in Kouhia in Denmark. And also has been a school exchange in textile design in Aalto University where I'm teaching in Finland. And just something few to mention, like in 2018 she has had 4 weaving kiosks in Finland, so just noted a few things from your CV. And also recognitions she has got in Danish Design Award 2016 and 2015 in Formex nomination as Formex Nova Nordic Designer of the Year in Stockholm. Tolnov Clausen's goal is to create interactive, aesthetic and tactile projects based on weaving. And her innovation, weaving kiosks are projects where people can participate, gain knowledge and relate to the textiles that surround us everywhere. Through company collaborations and internship at weaving mills in Italy, school stays in Firenze, Berlin and Helsinki, she has gained insight in and understanding of what our skills and forces are in Europe when it comes to textile craft and production. What traditions she as a textile designer originate from. Tolnov's great interest is how we can develop and reinterpret these traditions through design and thereby uphold them and the precious knowledge. And please, Rosa, can I please welcome and start your lecture about weaving kiosk, hand weaving, community and care of self.
Otherwise it would be a bit improvised. Thank you. Yes, please. Thank you. It's not freezing, so no one will see what you do. Oh, here I am. Oh, you are there. Yes.
So, thank you for the invitation and happy birthday. And thank you, Anna, for your lecture. It was very interesting. I read most of your thesis. I have enjoyed it very much. So my name is Rosa Clausen. I'm from Denmark and I'm educated originally as a textile designer. Now I also work as a textile designer, but also I do my doctoral studies in Gothenburg University in crafts, where I am researching why we should weave today, what's the role and the potentials of weaving in today's Nordic society, but also how weaving can take place. And this is a research project which has started, or it's based in my practice of the last 5 years. Because I am educated as a textile designer and I have also designed a lot of textiles and made myself. But today I mostly create spaces where other people can weave. And especially this project, the weaving kiosk, which has taken place the last 2 years in Finland, Denmark, Sweden and Iceland, has been a very strong fundament for this research project. So this lecture will mainly be about the weaving kiosk. But just to give you a feeling of what I have been doing since 2013, where I graduated in Kolding as a textile designer, I collected a few images. The thing was that my graduation project was a collaboration with a Danish company called Work by the Blind. And this is a company that employs blind and visually impaired craftsmen in different crafts processes as weaving or chair repairment or brush binding. And the company asked me, do you want to design a product that our weavers can reproduce? And I thought this is interesting. I haven't worked with blind and visually impaired craftsmen before. This like how will this take place? So I went to visit the company, and I saw how these craftsmen work very systematically. There is a system for everything, and then they also work with tactility. And I thought, like, this is actually what weaving is basically about. It's systems, it's number of threads per centimeter, the weaving width, the length, number of weft threads and warp threads, and then it's sensation, it's materials, it's structure. So the project became a toolbox from which the blind and visually impaired craftsmen could make selections of structures and compositions and decoration. And that project, it took half a year, and afterwards I was hired by the company to develop this into a production method. So I worked there for 2 years, and the thing that I realized in this company with this collaboration is that weaving is way more than making a textile. It is a social space to sit in a weaving workshop with other people. You share good experiences, maybe you also share hard experiences, difficult experiences. It's a space to be with yourself. Sometimes you just want to be absorbed in something else, and sitting by the loom, repeating the shuttle going through stepping down the pedals, this repetition and observation in your making process. And then it's a creative space where you put together colors and structures, and you create compositions. And that project has basically laid the fundament for all that I've been doing for the last 5 years, where I've created spaces where people can meet and exchange around weaving. They can have a break from everything else, just take a rest. They can be creative and through physical work with material. So these are some of the projects I've done in Denmark and in Japan and Korea in the past 5 years. But then in 2017, I created a project called the Weaving Kiosk. And the Weaving Kiosk started because I was interested in seeing here in the Nordic countries whether it would be possible to create a renewed interest in weaving. How can I get more people to weave in today's Nordic capitals? And can I do that by placing weaving centrally in the city? Can I do it by making weaving visible in the city? And maybe also attractive in terms of products. Would it help to get more practitioners if the products got more contemporary? So I got support from a number of Danish foundations and then the Nordic Cultural Foundation to make 9 weaving kiosks. It's been for the last 2 years. And because I am based in Helsinki, now also in Sweden, I set up most of the weaving kiosks here in Helsinki. And it became something that is called the permanent, impermanent location. Because the weaving kiosks here in Helsinki are not in one space, they are in different spaces around the city. That can be offices, it can be galleries, it can be fab labs. Wherever they want to take me in, I can set a kiosk up. And then they can take place for a month, every day. They can take place 3 days. That's depending on the time of this, that is available in the space. And then I love when there are windows, so that there is a street view, so that everybody who passes by can see inside the space and are drawn in. So there are many people who don't know about the weaving kiosk but just passes by and then come by for a conversation and then for weaving. And this is how it can look from the inside. This was in Isoniemi last year. So 9 of these kiosks have been set up in different spaces, in different locations in the cities and in the Nordic countries. And I think one of the things that I was very curious about was, would people come at all? Like, would they even come and weave? And very quickly I understood that yes, they do want to. Like, the kiosks have been full every time, and every time a new one has been announced, people come by. Another of my questions have been, so what do people want to do in the kiosks? For every kiosk, I have worked with a fashion designer called Merja Hannele-Ulvinen here from Finland, and we design a product every time we make a kiosk. If the kiosk is one day, then we think, okay, it has to be a product you can make fairly fast. So that's, for example, a little sample for a t-shirt that you can weave in 1 hour. If the kiosk is 1 month, it can be a backpack which takes 14 hours to weave. And with that we've experimented with like how much time do people want to spend weaving and what do they want to do. And in the back of the room there are more examples of products we made and different samples from the different kiosks. So people enter from the street and they sit down and they start weaving. So we have these basic product proposals. You don't have to make those if you don't want to, but you can. And then you can make your own version. Here there is 4 girls from Turku who were all weaving in the same weaving kiosk, and they each made their version of the same backpack. And this is the t-shirt. So hundreds of people have been weaving in the kiosk and have been making many different products. But one of the things that surprised me was that there's also a lot of people who didn't care about the product. They just wanted to be somewhere for a while and just take a break. In Stockholm, there were several people who came each day. Some of them had like a sick leave, and some of them just needed a pause. And for me, this has been one of the interesting observations, that the weaving space can be many different things for different people. And that the weaving kiosk, there you can make of the space what you need. I don't teach, like I'm happy to show you how to use one of the little rigid head looms, but if you don't want my help, it's okay. It can also be that I just help you going, and then the loom is so easy to work with that people very fast gain confidence in like how to use it, and then they start to explore by themselves and become independent of me. I have historical weaving books and technical weaving books from Japan and Mexico where I've been traveling, but I don't have any instructive material in the kiosk. I have these samples and little small products that I have been bringing from my travels. So, for example, the Japanese version of the rag rock, trasomatto. Yeah, so that is an obi, a belt, made of ripped up kimonos. So that's called sakiori. And then there are tea towels from Mexico, and also another example of sakiori. And all of these samples and textiles that I show in the kiosk, they're made with plain weave, because this loom can only weave plain weave. So the idea is that people take these samples, look at them, and then maybe have an idea for something that they could think about making. With time here in Helsinki, visitors in the kiosks have also started to bring material, and because it's a reoccurring event, people maybe start by making a product, but then they come back in the next kiosk and they say, I had this idea, I want to do that. So from kiosk to kiosk, people come back and new things are produced. And actually it was a quite interesting experience for Merja and I in the last kiosk in Kallio in September, because there we had the whole collection of products. And then all our visitors were like, no, but we want to do something completely different. So it seemed like the amount of examples and possibilities just sparked new ideas. This is what I'm really interested in, also researching in my project in Gothenburg. Why do people weave? And how can weaving take place today? I will just now, I completely skipped over my cards. What I have seen, so there are also questions of time. I just had a workshop in Copenhagen recently where there were many weavers that go to weaving courses. And I see that both the way of approaching weaving, that I don't give any technical knowledge and precise instructions or like given instructions. That's one thing that makes the weaving kiosk different from the course. But also that I do not expect you to necessarily come back. You can be in the kiosk for the time you need and when you need. And I think that is also something that I'm interested in researching further. How can weaving take place today, and are there different shapes of weaving and the weaving space and the weaving process? That's one of the things that I'm looking into. And also then the role of the product. Is it necessary always to make something? One of my questions right now is, can you weave something not physical? And what does it mean to take something away with you from the kiosk? This is a practice-based PhD, so the thing is also that the coming years I will set up more spaces, and my research will take place in the space, and the questions that I will investigate will be investigated through using different tools and engaging with people. And this was also one of the things that I would be very interested in discussing here. Like, what are I assume that many of you are textile practitioners. What are your motivations to weave? Is it to make something? In this weaving workshop in Copenhagen, I had also invited a group of weavers to a conversation and weaving, and many of them said that we don't know what to make anymore, but we don't want to stop weaving. And so one of my hypotheses in this research project is that most of us don't need any more products. So why keep weaving, and how? So this could be something that I would be very interested in hearing from you. And in case you are interested in my work, I have a website, and then in case there are some thoughts after the lecture, then you're also welcome always to contact me with questions. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rosa, very much. Very interesting. We are now really in a good time, so perhaps we do so that if we start with the questions that aroused with Anna's things, or how do you feel? Should we start with those so that we don't forget them? Because this is now in the fresh mind, I think. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, do you have any thoughts about Anna's Joutilasluokka and other things that I made some marks. Yes, please. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yes, I just speak now. Martin is my name. I'm also designer educated and work in craft related areas years, and I'm quite close to Rosa's project because we're quite close also. Other than that project, I went through your lecture. I was wondering one thing, you have analyzed the different notions or different aspects around craft and how they play into contemporary society, or rather how they are linked with, and where maybe that's my question. If the things that you observe, how would you kind of qualify them as a kind of cultural, in the sense of a need, or in the sense of a reaction towards something, or if there's a bodily thing, is that something that you would find that would be something that is kind of sought through these things, or like how do you locate the things that you research as in a sense of their importance, their significance for this cultural moment? Why are they happening? A bit like the question that Rosa was asking in the end. Why do you think this is happening?
Yeah, so what do I think crafts is now trending? Like, why is it important
For what reason is it important?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is, it resonates with many ideas, with people's ideas of themselves. It gives them kind of space to be inventive and creative and create new stuff and create stuff that somehow echo themselves, because crafting something is or having a thing that is handcrafted by yourself, that is something totally different than buying the same thing from a shop. It's kind of the process that I think is more intriguing for the people, for the purposes of making. They are intrigued by the process. I don't really have anything else to propose.
So it would be something in your analysis, something that relates to a sense of self.
Yeah, quite much so. And the meanings that the kind of the crafting process awakes in the self. What do you think?
I just find it interesting in the sense that like Rosa also said, there is on a material side, economic side, there's less and less reason for these things to happen. I come from a furniture design background, and I have now for the last 6 or maybe 10 years or so basically worked in a craft setup. I work not with industry, but I work with either craftsmen or I craft myself the things that I said. And so in that sense, for me, I've been pursuing this as a very kind of integrated thing to life, also the sustaining of life in a certain economical model, blah, blah, blah. We can unfold this endlessly. But less and less seem there to be kind of, material reasons to do this. And for me, one thing that, and maybe that's why I asked you the question, because this is something that I cannot also answer for myself, one of the main facets in craft is the coordinate of the body, which is hard to replace with anything else. So now, but we see that more and more displaced. We see that more and more unnecessary. So is it kind of a relapse of some humanism, kind of reaching out before it goes over the cliff? How would we describe that intelligence that we know, or like we suppose we know that pops out once you start making, and you don't think in text anymore and vocabulary. So it's really a question that I have. I do not have an answer, but I just find it a very complicatedly linked trajectory somehow. So yeah.
perspective, from gender perspective, and life cycle perspective. As you told, women have always either obliged or done leisure crafts. The other issue is that in today's working life, people are so stressed that they need some kind of making the difference, that they see what they have done. And the third perspective is life cycle. When you are in your third cycle or phase of life, retired, not working anymore, then this self-completion and self-doing something, doing something the rest of your life that is sustainable, might be important. So I would like to see different perspectives to be kind of analyzed in your study. Thank you.
I could say that I do agree with everything you said. We find a sense of purposefulness might be the core of the success of craftsmen or the popularity of making, or one reason behind it.
Any other questions or thoughts?
So in regards to the point of our craft, so I'm a digital designer, and I went to art school a long time ago, but I turn to craft now just to kind of use my hands again. Because even sketching, I do really quick sketches, and then I have to do really quick iterations on screens. But then from a philosophical standpoint, perhaps looking at existentialism and philosophy and psychology as a part of the process in terms of looking at purpose, belonging, all these kinds of themes. I think there can be a crossover. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted to say to that point that one of the things that I've noticed with the kiosk is that many designers come by to weave because they don't have the possibility to work with material in their everyday work. So they see it as a possibility to be physical. And actually I've discussed immediacy with these designers because they make sketches on computer and they send to China, then they're produced in China and come back, and then they have to look them through and tests or changes need to be made. And there, in some cases, it's actually faster to have a hand loom, even though the process is slower. So I just think there is also some interesting thing about time there and immediacy that is connected.
Okay, I give you
I'll tell you what happened in a small community where I'm spending my summers. They had rooms, weaving rooms, some 2, 3, but then they decided, and they need like the training, body training equipments, and they got from the European Union's leadership money to buy the training equipment, and they skipped out the weaving rules. And I had been there in summers, sometimes I had been weaving there, so I was very sad about this happening.
So I have to go back to the last lecture we had that all people should do something with their hands, and of course with the physics as well, but not giving up the weaving and handicrafts at all. Any further questions?
Comment on that. Okay.
Yeah, because quite see that why like equipment for physical health are better than the loom, because loom like weaving is or can be very physical as well, and Rosa will know probably even better than myself, so I would get both.
I have a question well, not question, but like what Anna was highlighting in the end, that the kind of the variance between anxiety and negative feelings in making handicrafts can be very fast. That do you agree? Do you know the feeling with handicrafts that when you are, for example, sewing something, sewing machine, and you are so anxious to get it finished, and then something goes wrong? So the thing that I was thrilled was that be messy, like it belongs to the handicrafts. And another thing that I kind of, what thoughts I got was that with handicrafts we are loaded with instructions that we have to follow, and then when you don't follow, you are out and doing things wrong. What do you think about that? Do you have any experience of this kind of feelings? The audience here.
No, so as I mentioned, I think that there really are different approaches, and I also think that now especially in Denmark, I find that craftsmen can become very obsessed with edges and like correctness, and it can be a limitation for the exploration. One of my rules in the beginning when working with work by the blind was that we didn't correct mistakes. We learned from them. Maybe we even did more of them, so they became deliberate. So like looking differently at mistakes, and also seeing the potential in mistakes, so that there also is a development aesthetically. And the other thing I wanted to say was that the failure and the frustration, I think everybody in the kiosk have experienced. Like the first 10 minutes are super frustrating. The edges are not like it's going inwards, and the shuttle goes through the space, and it's really frustrating. And then the feeling when you master this, suddenly something has happened. That is so nice, both for me to see that, but I also sense it on the people weaving. And I had a kiosk in Katajanokka in November for Google, who had invited me to do a kiosk as part of a conference. And that was just to mention how that was a failure for me, because the conference was a walking through event, and people didn't spend 10 minutes in each place. So they never came beyond the frustration and the failure. They shot in 5 wefts, and then it didn't work, and people left. And that was, for example, where I say weaving is immediate and fast in the kiosk, but you cannot spend less than 10 minutes. Otherwise, it really doesn't become nice or a success. So yeah.
I also want an interesting project to share with you. I did one, it was called Reflective Yarn Project with craft students in Rauma 2 years ago. And it was based on experimentation. The students were instructed to take like 10 strings of yarn with different types of yarns, and then started to experiment with the techniques that were familiar to them. And no other instructions were given. And well, some of the students, they took crochet hooks, some took knitting pins, and some like experimented with macrame or whatever techniques they liked. But the interesting thing is that part of the project was they had to keep a diary of their project and then write a reflective short text after the project. And well, what was interesting that quite many of the students eventually found this project very rewarding, because there were no such things as doing something wrong or doing something right. And then there were some students who were frustrated all the time, who were kind of angry at me because I wasn't giving them instructions where to start, what to do next, what was the right thing to do, and what techniques were supposed to be used. And they were all angry, and it was reflected on the text as well. And well, as I said, quite many of the people, or the students were, they find something new. The idea was that they should reflect also their learning during the process. And as I read the text that I noticed that quite many of them had actually learned quite much during this process, because this was completely different that craft makers or hobbyist makers tend to do, or tend to usually test or select as their works. That was interesting for me.
Okay, do you have some questions for kiosk or yes?
I would continue with this kiosk if they would have it here.
As something is going to happen.
Yeah, it is. Something will happen, and I really love the kiosk. I also, but I do not exactly know how it's going to develop. But there will be something.
And I thought you were on Instagram.
Facebook is easier, and then my website is good.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe Instagram at some point, but I'm not super good with updating.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And welcome.
Yes, let's take part in the kiosk.
Okay. A few questions I just want to ask from Rosa about organizing the kiosk, the concept that you said about the window, like the visibility. So is that to see is to understand? Or how people, do you want them, the people who are outside, to make them curious?
So I think that first it was to claim the space. Like I want to craft, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Because I'm really bad at coordinating with the microphone. So I think that what I first of all was interested in was to make craft visible and weaving visible and kind of claim that here it is and expose people to weaving in everyday life. And then of course I also see that it attracts people and in different neighborhoods you have people passing by every day, and if you're there for a while they come inside and say hello. I also think that like looking at the project now, I can also see that it has created very many interesting meetings, because elderly weavers have come by and they see a loom and they come in, and then there are some young people sitting weaving and a conversation starts. There was a Turkish girl who came inside and she said the looms are the wrong way around because she was used to the upstanding carpet loom. And then a conversation starts because you see the weaving. But then we have also had kiosks without windows. One in Copenhagen, and then we had one in Kontula, in the shopping mall in Kontula, and I was on the first floor in a space called Museum of Impossible Forms. And I was really curious what would happen, because you have to move in and up. But the way people use that shopping mall, it seemed so natural to go inside and explore what was happening. And there the kiosk was placed beside a mosque, which was also very interesting and completely different meetings. And that was maybe a thing I didn't highlight enough now, is speaking how moving around, especially Helsinki, has exposed the kiosk to a lot of different people, and have also exposed a lot of different people to weaving. And I think that has been one of the most valuable experiences for me, that we didn't just keep to one area and had like a local crowd, but and people have actually traveled for the weaving kiosk. So people who had never been to Kontula before suddenly took the metro and tried that. Yeah.
Any other questions? A really interesting point of views, like as a societal thing, like how, because there are in each city there are borders that you don't cross,
It's actually,
social borders.
yeah, it's actually also one of my questions now in my research, whether weaving is an especially well-suited craft for crossing social borders, because it is an investment to buy a loom, to have a space. So maybe you actually do want to travel for the possibility to weave. And maybe it's a way to get people to move around the city and explore different places than usual.
Definitely. One, if I can ask again one question, like you said that there are people who just want to be in the kiosk, almost doing nothing. That was something really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, is it the atmosphere of being together, or more than doing together, or kind of safe place, or what is the thing?
I don't know exactly.
It was really interesting.
But I think that the fact that I don't tell you what to do,
Yes.
and I like right now I have a phrase about doing what you want to do while being among others. So each person have their thing going on. They don't necessarily interact, but we are in the same space together. And I think that there are very few places in today's society where we don't have to perform and deliver, and where we are not on all the time. Like, the thing is also that you can't sit with your mobile phone while weaving. You have to keep it in the pocket or in the bag. And I think that the weaving kiosk maybe has been a kind of free space for people. In Stockholm, there was one example of a young woman who was unemployed and had to deliver a lot for the unemployment agency, and she lost the joy. She was a textile designer and had really lost the joy in making textiles. And I observed with her how the making process, where nobody expected anything, gave her joy and gave her joy back. And of course, I don't know what happened in her life otherwise in that period, but a month after the weaving kiosk ended, she had a job. And of course I don't know, but I just think this is also interesting for me. What does it do to us? And how can we have a space, or make the space that we need to make for
story. Do you have any questions or experiences like Rosa told that how can you bring back the joy of handicraft or some spirit that it definitely has?
It's that if you're doing something with your hands, for me, it's my head is resting. So I can do whatever goes inside my head, but my hands are doing. I'm looking at my hands, and it's meditating. It's really enjoyable.
And what do you do?
I'm a pensioner.
But also
I do anything,
Yeah.
whatever comes to my mind.
Yeah.
I worked as a lab assistant, so it was handicrafts as well. So I'm doing with my hands. Now I did some woodworks and stuff like that, whatever comes to my mind.
Yeah.
So it is, but weaving is really nice. And the head is resting.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Any other experiences? I'm completely sure that you have experienced this kind of enjoyment, some of you.
I have a friend here that have courses for pottery, and and she said that people they don't want to pot, they just want to just feeling of the potter's wheel, and how to, but they don't mind about it. But she even had to do for firing.
So it's maybe just something really to add, and hopefully short. I think you also began your question or your lecture with that, and we ended there that it's a kind of a thing about the self in a way, and like many of us who have gone and done this kind of thing. What I think I'm fascinated by, or what would for me be a question that I would maybe like to, be able to follow a bit more on a wider front, is that what does it do to us as a society? What does it do in between us? The individual experience is very easy to trace once you go there. You know what happens with you. But what type of society does it create if you have these opportunities? If these spaces are there, if you can relate with the people in the way that you relate with them, what does that do as compared to other skills? You brought the example of Denmark now going like, we have I'm from Germany, and I think in Finland it's a bit the same now that there is funding for educational institutions is a bit kind of guided by the idea of excellence. Craft does not build on excellence, it builds on, I don't want to use the term diversity, but it builds on things that you do not know, which will kind of appear at some point. So in the workshop that I've been having, one of the key experiences that I like, I've been quoting so many times, is a friend of mine moved to a new apartment, needed to build a new pottery sample for his kid. The option A, had he not known that we would have that workshop, would be to go to Jysk or to IKEA or so. The moment that he knew that there was a workshop with a saw, with everything, he came to me with an A5 thing and started thinking about his space, about the needs that he would have to put into that space and how could they be realized. So a completely different chapter opened in his space, and then there's conflict solving involved when you work together with people. So like the one thing that I think also pursuing the things in my work is, and that I would really like to have more in this discussion, is what does it do to us as a society having these types of opportunities and spaces on top of the individual benefit that they certainly have.
Okay, thank you. I can't help saying that when we are talking about handicrafts, that if we go to China, that they don't have handicrafts, not doing it, what it does to society. I mean that what we are doing here, we will perhaps, now we have been talking more about individual point of views, but let's see what happens, because I think it's a huge power if people work together, like you are doing your kiosks, what possibilities it offers to people individually, but as a group in a bigger scale as well.
I just wanted to say that there now, because I spend so much time in Denmark and Sweden, it's very, very unique what I see here in Finland with weaving and weaving spaces around the city where you can go and weave when you want to. We don't have that in Denmark. And here, when people come to the kiosk, they talk about the kind of loom. In Denmark, they ask, "What's that?" So it's just very, very interesting for me how there is a memory here about craft and an existing knowledge still. Yeah.
Just to add the history of the Friends of Finnish Handicraft and thinking about the society and the DIY things that the company has been producing during the 140 years. It's something to add to the history and the content.
That is kind of very good ending to the lecture, really indeed, because I was just thinking it's not only the grandmothers, it's even further, much further than that for us nowadays. But do you want something still to ask why these people here weave or something? Do you have any questions? Because
I think what is interesting for me especially is like what do you weave and what happens with what do you make and what happens with what you make? Is it for other people? Is it for yourself? Have you experienced the problem of not knowing what to make anymore? Or is that not something you
I'd like to learn to weave, so I started off just knitting, and so I'm knitting little cotton things, little squares, and I find it really helps with anxiety. So if I get anxious, I just start doing these little squares. So that's what works for me.
the comments?
Okay. Also, you're welcome to write an email at any time if somebody thinks of something. I would be very happy.
And to follow you, I just asked you a friend.
And I also brought the little weaving kiosk publications in case anybody's interested. And there actually is a very nice essay by the German Bauhaus weaver Annie Albers called "Work with Material," and it's a very beautiful essay exactly around what weaving does to us in the state of modernism, but I think it's still very relevant today.
Okay, so I think we have to finish now, and I thank you, Anna, and thank you, Rosa, and thank you also, the audience, for this today. And I think that you can also check through the products that Anna has brought, and also the magazine. It was really nice looking. And yes, please also follow the last lecture of Finnish Handicrafts Friends. It's going to be next Tuesday, 16th of subject is Metsäkansan kankaat, so sustainable textiles. But thank you all.